Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the high school, and welcome to the drama room. Thank you all for coming. All right, so we're going to take care of a couple of things first. If you could, do me a solid. Take out your cell phone. Oh, I've got messages. Go ahead and turn these all the way off if you can. At the very least, go ahead and put it on silent. These are relatively new actors. We have a couple of veterans, but a lot of brand new actors. And any distraction from the audience really throws off the actors. They're getting better. They're a really solid cast, but it's amazing. They hear a cell phone and, or?
That's funny.
You. But please don't be that one person whose phone goes off, because everyone's going to give you a hard time for it. All right. Next order of business. We do have a restroom. In fact, 2 of them. You'll have to leave the room, go to the next building over, and you'll find a door that is braced open by a trash can. Nothing but the best. That's our restroom. I just ask that once you've used the restroom, replace the trash can so that the next person can get in. Otherwise it locks and I have to go unlock it. And I'm a busy man. There is another restroom right around the corner with the same restrictions. Eventually, there will be a theater here for Fillmore High School. Hi there, come on in.
Hi, Gabby.
All right, let's see, there's an intermission in about 40 minutes or so. It depends on how excited the actors are and how quickly they go, but it should be about 35, 40 minutes. And after the show, because it's closing night, I will have a few things to say about my seniors. And I do have a good number of seniors in this cast. 10 of my 15 actors are seniors. So I promise to keep it as brief as possible, but it's also personal. So I want to make sure that I share the best thoughts for these individuals. And if you feel you need to boogie out, don't worry about it. No harm, no foul. But I do want to say a few words for these kids. We do have a seat here and a seat right over here. Unfortunately, that one's being used by our bailiff. All right. What else? I'll save the really good stuff for the end. Enjoy the show. If you need anything, I'll be right outside.
Excuse me, I just have a question.
Oh, yes.
When I came in, I asked if there was air conditioning or there was a fan that they put on, and he said yes, but there's nothing on.
I do have an air conditioner. Let me double check, make sure it's working. It has cut out in the past. Oh.
Magic.
Glad I could be here. Can I add anything else? Thank you. I'm Josh Overton. I'm the director. This is my 21st year here, and we've been away from this a long time, and I appreciate it because I forget. I haven't done this speech in a long time. Last year we did on stage in front of an audience was over 895 days ago. Yeah, 3 years ago, almost 3 years ago, we had an audience. On March 13th, Friday the 13th of March 2020, we had a show that was canceled on opening night. We didn't get a chance to put it up in front of an audience because school was shut down because of COVID. So we had a cast that was ready to go. In fact, Fidelis here is a representative of that cast. Thank you for showing up again. He played death. I don't think that's ominous at all. Yeah, it was heartbreaking because, again, we had a number of amazing seniors in that show. including my daughter and her best friend. And they did not get that opportunity to do a show. Well, they did one earlier that year, but still. Anyway, enjoy the play. I'm proud of these actors, and I'm hopeful that you enjoy it. And laugh, applaud, enjoy the crap out of this performance. These kids are amazing. All right, I'll talk to you soon.
Good morning, Alan.
How do you feel about it this morning?
Oh, the same.
Do you still think you can get Barbara acquitted?
She didn't do it. Whether I can get her acquitted or not, she didn't do it.
Didn't she?
We shouldn't be talking this way, should we?
I'm not talking as Alan Woodward, prosecutor to Barbara Scott, counsel for the defense. I'm talking as your friend.
I see.
Your friend and something more. I hope. I want to wish you luck, Edith, on your first big case.
Thank you.
I think Barbara's guilty, and I'm going to do my best to prove that. But as your friend, I still want
Well,
to
at
wish you
least
luck.
you're being frank.
Would you have me do any less than my best? Less than my duty as a sworn officer of this county?
You'll pardon me, Alan, but I'd like to get through this before Judge Finley arrives.
Sure. Sure. Ms. Carter,
Yes, Mr. Woodward?
do you have our schedule of witnesses?
Yes, right here.
Good morning, Edith.
Good morning, Barbara. Did you have a good night?
Sure, it was fun. Miss Lee takes good care of me.
We do, boys.
How much longer is it going to take?
Why, it's hard to say. Now that the jury has been sworn in, perhaps 3 or 4 days more, something like that.
I wish we could just get this over with, Edith. Why must we go through with this farce?
Oh, now, Barbara.
It's brutal. There's no reason for me to be subjected to this kind of spectacle when I've already told everyone.
Don't get yourself all upset, honey. We've got a long day ahead of you. Better relax.
Barbara, court will be in session in just a few moments. This may be the last time you can tell me what really happened.
I've told you.
I mean the truth.
I've told you. I've told everyone the truth over and over again, and I'm sick and tired. of
Please,
talking.
Barbara. Why won't you let me reach you? Why won't you confide in me?
Here comes Judge Finley now. All rise. Court of General Sessions, 3rd District is now in session. The Honorable Judy Finley presiding. Be seated.
In the action specifying first degree murder of the people versus Barbara Scott. Are the people ready?
The people are ready, Your Honor.
Is the defense ready?
The defense is ready, Your Honor.
You may proceed with your opening statements.
Your Honor, and ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the opening statement for the people is not going to take very much of your time. As Assistant District Attorney for this county, it's been my duty to prepare and try a good many cases. But almost never, and certainly never when the crime charged was first-degree murder, as is this one, has the outcome been less in doubt. An indictment was voted and returned by the grand jury, charging that the defendant now before you, Barbara Scott, did on the evening of February 7th last, willfully and with malice aforethought, seek and effect by means of a pistol shot the demise of Chester Arthur Brandt, a resident of this county. Now, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the defendant in this trial, as in any other trial in this country, is presumed to be innocent until proved guilty beyond any reasonable doubt in your own minds. Now, fortunately for you all, and for all of us, that will be a simple, clean-cut process in this case. The evidence in support of the indictment is abundant and permits of no other interpretation than the defendant's guilt. It will be presented to you step by step, and once you've seen and heard it all, you'll be able to return the verdict prescribed by the law and demanded by the state, with a good conscience and the knowledge that you have fulfilled your jury duties as you swore to do when you entered that jury box. Thank you. All I wish to say at this time.
Is the defense ready to present their opening statements?
If Your Honor, please. Your Honor. And ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this is very difficult for me. If I seem somewhat uncertain from time to time, I may ask for your indulgence, since it's the first time I've ever tried a case involving a capital offense. But more than that, there is a special relationship between my client and myself. You see, Barbara Scott is my sister. We've been very close to each other, and by her efforts, I was able to complete my studies and become an attorney. So you see, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I have good reason to know that she is incapable of having committed the crime with which the indictment charges her.
Just a moment. Your Honor, I ask that the court rule on the admissibility of these remarks designed to secure sympathy on the basis of a personal relationship between the defendant and her counsel.
That is a difficult ruling to make, Mr. Woodward, since the court is not aware of any precedent to guide them in this matter. However, I will ask counsel for defense to let herself be guided, so far as possible, by the regular rules of procedure, which is no doubt familiar.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I ask you to keep an open mind during the course of this trial. And I ask you to keep in mind that when you hear the case of the prosecution, that much of it is based on circumstantial evidence, which must leave some doubt in your minds, some reasonable doubt, that the defendant is guilty of the horrible crime with which she is charged. And again, I ask you to bear with my inexperience and help me obtain from my client a fair and impartial hearing. If you will do that, I have no concern of the outcome. Thank you.
The people may present its witnesses.
Call Roberta McPherson.
Roberta McPherson? Roberta McPherson!
Place your hand on the Bible. Do you swear that the evidence you're about to give is the whole truth as you know it before your God?
I do.
State your name and place of residence.
Roberta McPherson, 115 North Elm Avenue.
Take the stand.
Miss McPherson, you're a police officer in the service of this county.
I am. Rank of lieutenant.
And at about 8 o'clock on the evening of February 7th last, you were on official duty.
I was at main headquarters in charge of the night homicide detail.
In pursuit of your duty, you were called to the residence of Chester Arthur Brandt, an apartment at 420 Park Drive West.
That's right.
What time did you arrive there?
Well, the precinct boys answered the first call and notified me at 8:07. I went over right away, and it was 8:19 when I got there.
And you took charge of the case for the police and remained in charge until it was handed over to the district attorney's office for prosecution.
I did.
Please tell the jury what you found when you answered the call of the Brandt apartment.
Well, the precinct boys took me into the living room and showed me the stiff. Pardon me, the body. They'd already identified the man as Chester Brandt.
You checked the identification.
That's right. Mr. Kelton, the butler.
He was present in the apartment at the time?
That's right. He lived there.
And were you able to determine for how long Mr. Brandt had been dead upon your arrival?
Not right then I wasn't. Although, from the looks of things, it couldn't have been too long.
Objection, Your Honor. Conjecture on part of the witness?
Sustained. Snorkel strike the last part of witness's remarks from the record.
What at some later time you were able to determine Mr. Brandt's approximate time of death?
That's right. When I got the autopsy report from the medical examiner's office.
Just a moment. Is this the report to which you just referred?
That's right. Signed by Dr. Hatterman, Chief Medical Examiner.
Would you read it to the court, please, the pertinent parts?
Death was caused by a bullet entering the neck and shattering the spinal connection at the rear, probably instantaneous. From examination of digestive organs and supporting evidence, death can be placed to no earlier than 6:30 p.m. February 7, and no later than 8 p.m., February 7th.
Thank you. Your Honor, I ask that this report be admitted into testimony and be designated as People's Exhibit Number 1.
Let it be admitted.
Now, Lieutenant, after you checked the identity of the dead man, what was your next step?
I tried to find out how he was killed.
How he was killed? You were satisfied Mr. Brandt had not shot himself?
Very. There were no powder burns around the wound like you normally get when it's self-inflicted. And when I talked to the prisoner,
The prisoner? Do you mean Barbara Scott, the defendant in this case?
That's right.
If she's present in this courtroom and you recognize her, please point her out to the court.
That's her right there.
Thank you. Now, Miss Scott was present in the Brandt apartment, under arrest, when you arrived there, and you questioned her, Lieutenant.
I did.
Please repeat to the court what she told you.
I'd asked her if she'd killed Brandt. She said yes, she had. I asked her how she did it. She said that she'd shot him with a pistol, a .22 automatic. I asked her how she obtained that pistol. She said that she had purchased it, that it was licensed to her.
Just a moment. This pistol you referred to, it was recovered in the Brandt apartment.
That's right. The boys had it when I got there.
I see. Now, this is how you take the pistol. Is this the pistol to which you've just referred?
That's right. That's my tag on it.
The one recovered in the apartment of the deceased.
The boys took it off Barbara Scott when they got into the living room. She was holding it in her hand.
And you checked her statement that she had purchased it and had a license for it.
I did. The application stated that she purchased it 3 years ago and renewed it every year since. It also stated that she required it because she sometimes handled large sums of money for her employer.
Thank you. Your Honor, I ask that this pistol be admitted to testimony and be designated as People's Exhibit Number 2.
Let it be admitted.
Now, Lieutenant, please continue with your account of what Miss Scott said to you during your questioning of her.
Well, that's about it. Like I told you, there wasn't that much to her story. She admitted that she killed Brandt, and that's what I was interested in.
And you were satisfied of the truth of what she told you.
Don't answer that yet, Lieutenant. Objection 2, Your Honor. On the ground that this question calls for conclusion on part of the witness.
Sustained. Reframe your question, Mr. Woodward.
Very well, Your Honor. There was nothing about the circumstances that you observed in the Brandt apartment, Lieutenant McPherson, that ran counter to Miss Scott's statement of her guilt to you?
Nothing. Everything checked out with her story.
And the statement that she made to you in which she admitted her guilt. Do you have that to be down by somebody?
One of the boys took it down in shorthand.
And did you then show that statement of her guilt to her and ask her to sign it?
That's regular procedure.
And the defendant did sign that statement in witness to its truth and accuracy.
She did.
And is this her original statement, embodying in substance what you've just told us and signed by the defendant, Barbara Scott?
It is.
Thank you. Your Honor, I ask that this statement be admitted into testimony and be designated as People's Exhibit Number 3.
Does counsel for defense wish to verify the authenticity of the exhibit before it is admitted into evidence?
Why? I don't think that is necessary, Your Honor. The defense is not questioning the exhibit.
Let it be admitted.
Now, Lieutenant, just one more question for you. In obtaining the statement just admitted into evidence, did you or any of your fellows resort to force or mental coercion of any sort?
No, sir. Nothing like that at all. She cooperated willingly and told us everything that we wanted to know.
Thank you. Please remain where you are for cross-examination. Your witness, Counselor.
Thank you. Lieutenant, when you obtained a statement from my client, did you inform her that it could be used against her in a trial?
We're required to do that? Yes.
And did you also inform her of her rights, that she was entitled to have an attorney present before signing the statement?
I guess you don't have to describe what my duty is. I know what I'm doing. I've been doing far before.
Strike the response from the record. If you know your job, Mr. Pearson, you should know better than to indulge personalities while testifying.
Sorry, Your Honor.
Read the last question to the witness.
And did you also inform her of her rights, that she was entitled to have an attorney present before signing the statement?
I told her.
And how did she respond?
She waived that. Said that she didn't want an attorney.
Now, Lieutenant, you explained to us that you questioned my client on how she shot Brandt, where she got the gun, and so forth. But you did not tell us that you questioned my client on why she had shot him.
I did.
But you didn't tell us.
I wasn't asked.
Very well, I ask you now. Did you question the defendant about motive?
Yes, sir. Ma'am. Yes, ma'am, I did.
And what did she say?
Well, she said that Brent was evil, that he deserved to die, and that
Did
he
she
had
tell you any particular injury that he had done to her?
Well, nothing in particular, no, but I could tell
Did she give you no real motive, did she, Lieutenant? Other than some vague generality about Brent deserving to die.
No, but I could tell that she had done it because she had
Never
a
mind,
better...
we already answered that question. Now, Lieutenant, you said during your direct testimony, and I quote, "She admitted she killed Brant, and that's what I was interested in." Just what did you mean by that?
What do I mean? Why, that I was interested in nabbing the killer.
In making an arrest, do you mean?
Sure, in making an arrest. What's wrong with that?
Nothing, as long as you were sure that you were arresting the right person. Were you, Lieutenant?
Certainly.
Does that mean you made a careful investigation of every circumstance of Chester Brandt's death? Every minute detail?
My investigation was as careful as necessary.
As careful as necessary? Considering you had an easy arrest. Considering that my client readily admitted to shooting Chester Arthur Brandt. And for what reason? You still don't know. Is that how careful your investigation was?
I didn't say that.
But it's true, isn't it?
Not the way you put it. I was only
Very
trying to do
well.
my
That is all,
job.
Lieutenant.
I guess I don't need another lawyer telling me what my job
That is all, Lieutenant! Thank you.
Stay where you are just a minute, Lieutenant. You've been on the police force a good many years, Lieutenant.
I have. 17 years to be exact.
And you've received a number of citations for devotion to duty and your work in the solving of crimes.
Well, I suppose I've had a few in my time.
And you've appeared in court many times to testify in cases involving homicide and other capital offenses.
More than I can remember.
And Lieutenant, your integrity, your efficiency as an officer of the law have never been questioned.
Not to my knowledge. Never, Mr. Woodward.
No further questions. You're excused now. Call Louis Rennie.
Louis Rennie? Louis Rennie.
Place your hand on the Bible. Do you swear that the evidence you're about to give is the whole truth as you know it before your God?
Yes, I do.
State your name and place of residence.
Louis Ray, 399 Cameron Street.
Take the stand.
Now, Mr. Rennie, you're a police officer in the service of this county with the rank of captain.
I am?
And you're assigned to the police laboratory, main headquarters.
Right.
Will you explain to the court what services are performed at that laboratory?
Yes. We have several departments there. A fingerprint department, another for chemical and mechanical analysis.
That is analysis of materials that may be useful as evidence.
That's right. Or to help in tracking down criminals. Then, of course, we have a ballistics department.
And would you explain the function of that department to the court, please?
Yes, sir. The most important function is the inspection of bullets that have been fired in the commission of some crime, and matching them with the guns from which they were discharged.
And the matching of bullet to gun, that is an exact science, an infallible one.
Well, maybe not quite infallible, but with our latest methods, and if the bullet hasn't been struck too far to shape, we can be reasonably certain, especially if we're given the gun to match the bullet over. You see, sometimes we're only given the bullet and told to determine what make and caliber of the gun it was discharged from.
Yes, I understand. But in this case, in the homicide investigation into the death of Chester Brandt, you were given both the bullet and the gun to match too.
We were.
Now, I ask you to look at this pistol, designated People's Exhibit Number 2, and tell us if it is the same that you were given to examine in the Brandt investigation.
It is.
Well, how can you identify it? That's a fairly common model, isn't it?
Yes, a Colt automatic, 22 caliber. I can identify it by the means of the notch made on the barrel, right here.
I see. Now, Captain, I also have here a bullet. I'm going to ask you a question. Seen that bullet before?
Aha.
Under what circumstances?
It was sent to us by the medical examiner's office. They recovered it from Brandt's body during the autopsy. Right here.
I see. And this bullet is the same that you were given to examine, to match to the pistol just identified in the Brandt investigation?
It is.
And they did in fact match.
He certainly did. There's no question about it. This bullet was fired from this pistol.
How can you be so certain, Captain?
Well, you see, this bullet is still in almost perfect shape, and it's got a good clear set of markings. They match the barreling on the inside of the pistol exactly. No question at all.
Thank you. Your Honor, I ask that this bullet be admitted into testimony and be designated as People's Exhibit Number 4.
Let it be admitted.
Now, Captain, did your laboratory perform any other services in the course of the Brandt investigation?
Yes. Our men were called in the very beginning of the investigation to take fingerprints of various articles in the Brandt department, including that pistol I just identified.
And were they successful in getting such fingerprints?
They were more successful than usual. Very seldom we get such clear takes.
And were you then asked to match those takes with a set made by the defendant, in this case, Barbara Scott?
We were.
And did Barbara Scott's prints match those found on the articles in the Brandt department, including that pistol you just identified?
They certainly did.
You're positive of that?
Yes. Fingerprinting is a positive science. They're non-file all over the world, more than 1 billion sets. And no two sets made by two different people have ever proved to be exactly alike.
So that there can be no question that the prints found on the various articles in the Brandt department, especially that pistol you just identified, were made by the defendant, Barbara Scott.
No, sir. No question whatever.
And, Captain, in your investigation, did you find any other fingerprints besides those that you were able to identify as Miss Scott's?
No, sir. Only hers.
Thank you. Your witness, Counselor.
Thank you. Just one or two questions, Captain. You said you found no prints on the pistol other than those you were able to identify as my client's.
Miss Scott's. That's right.
But isn't it true, Captain, from your knowledge and experience, that a murderer, that is when contemplating such a crime with malice aforethought, is usually very careful in not leaving his prints on the murder weapon and will usually wear gloves in the act of committing this crime?
Objection! Your Honor, this question calls for speculation and opinion on the part of the witness.
I submit, Your Honor, that I have the right to solicit an opinion in his own very specialized field by a witness who has been qualified as an expert by the people.
Yes, I believe I'm going to allow that line of questioning. Objection overruled. Answer the question, Captain Rennie.
Well, what you suggest is perfectly true, Miss Scott. That's why I was surprised when we got that set of perfect prints. 9 times out of 10, the criminal will do everything he can to avoid leaving his fingerprints on the scene.
Thank you. No further questions, Captain. You're excused.
Call Glenn Kelton.
Glenn Kelton? Glenn Kelton!
Wow. Have you ever been in a court? Have you been in a trial? I'm gonna be in a trial. I'm gonna be.
Glenn Kelton!
I'm coming! God's sakes, what's your hurry? Place your hand on the Bible. Yes, ma'am, I'll be happy to. It's a book I always try to live by. Do you swear that the evidence you're about to give is the whole truth as you know it before your God? Well, my land. You don't think I lie. Just say I do, sir. I do. I'm not getting married. At least I don't think I am.
Proceed, please.
I'm sorry, Your Honor. All right, I do. State your name and place of residence. My name is Glenn. Be sure to get that right now. It's L-Y-N-N, just like in Brooklyn. Glenn Kelton. And I reside at 107 Leicester Avenue. Take a stand. You might at least provide a comfortable place to sit.
What's your occupation, Mr. Kelton?
I'm a butler.
Presently employed?
Well, no, I've been out of job since Mr. Grant passed on.
Mr. Kelton?
So you know of anyone who's looking for a butler with the finest references?
Mr. Kelton, there are certain rules and regulations of courtroom procedure that we must all try to live by. It would save you and I both time and trouble if you keep your replies to my questions directly to the point and as brief as possible.
Oh, all right. If that's the way you want it.
Thank you. Now, who was your most recent employer?
Mr. Brandt?
Do you mean Chester Arthur Brandt, recently deceased?
That's right. I guess everybody knows he was murdered, shot, killed off in cold blood. Oh, I'm sorry. I'll try to do it the way you want.
I'm sure the court will appreciate your cooperation. Now, until his death, you were employed as a butler by Chester Arthur Brandt at his apartment at 420 Park Drive West.
That's right.
And during your employment, you resided in the apartment.
I did. I had my own room and bath. It was a very large apartment. 9 rooms, 4 baths.
And how long were you employed by Mr. Grant?
Well, it's been 8 years in the fall. No, 9 years. I remember because Mr. Grant was planning on holding a celebration for
9
the
years. Thank you. You had some knowledge then of his affairs, of his private life?
Oh, yes. Nobody had any more knowledge. He spent most of his time in that apartment.
He didn't have an office or a place of business?
Sure, he had an office, but most of the time he didn't go near it. Maybe 1 or 2 days a week at the most.
I see. And do you know of your own knowledge, Mr. Calvin, what Mr. Brandt's business consisted of?
Well, investments, I guess you call it. Stocks and bonds, real estate, wherever there's money to be made. Some folks called him a gambler.
Oh, objection, Your Honor, hearsay.
Sustained. Strike the last part of witness's reply.
You must only respond with what you know of your own knowledge, Mr. Calvin. Now we've heard other people say. That's one of the rules.
Well, I am trying.
Thank you. But you do know that Mr. Brandt was a man of considerable resources. What could be called a rich man.
Oh my, yes. Money was the least of his worries.
Did he at times keep large sums of it around the apartment?
He did, and I used to tell him all the time he was too careless with it.
Careless? In what way, Mr. Calvin?
Well, he had the safe in his study, one of those wall types, but most of the time he didn't bother using it. Just keep the money laying his desk drawer in an envelope.
Do you know for what purpose Mr. Brandt found it necessary to keep such large sums of money around the apartment?
It wasn't really necessary, just that he liked to have it around.
You know that to be a fact?
I used to argue with him about it all the time. I told him he could pay by check. He's just asking to be robbed. But he'd only laugh and call me old buddy-buddy.
Now, Mr. Calvin, you're also familiar with the defendant in this trial, Barbara Scott.
I should say, yeah, I know her as well as I know my own sister.
If she's present in this courtroom and you recognize her, please point her out to the court.
Such rigmarole. That's her right there.
Thank you. Now, you've known Miss Scott for a number of years.
Ever since I went to work for Mr. Brandt.
You saw her frequently. I'm so sorry. You saw her frequently around his apartment.
Yeah, she was in and out all the time.
On what basis?
Basis. Oh, she worked for Mr. Brandt. You know, is that what you mean?
Yes. And do you know what Miss Scott's job was with Mr. Brandt?
Oh, well, she was his secretary. Sort of.
A sort of secretary?
Well, she did a lot of other things for him too, like doing his shopping, buying him theater tickets, things like that. He used to call her his girl Friday.
I see. And would the defendant often handle large sums of money for Mr. Brandt?
Lots of times, every week.
For what purpose?
Salaries for the people at the office. Miss Scott would come and get it from the apartment, take it down to the office to pay them off.
And do you know why Mr. Brandt found it necessary to pay his employees in cash rather than by check?
He never told me, but I guess.
Never mind. Now, when Miss Scott came to get the cash for the payroll, would Mr. Brandt get it for her from that wall safe in the office that you mentioned?
Once in a while, or most of the time, he just had in his desk drawer an envelope.
So that Miss Scott knew that there was likely to be considerable money in that drawer.
Objection, Your Honor. This question
Sorry,
calls
I withdraw it. But the defendant did many times see Mr. Brandt take money out of that drawer to give to her.
Often.
Now, Mr. Cousin, I'm going to ask you about the events on the evening of last February 7th. Do you remember those events?
Do I remember? Well, I'll never forget them as long as I live.
And was Mr. Brandt at home in his apartment that day?
He was. He didn't go to his office at all.
And were you also in the apartment all day, Mr. Carlton?
I was until Mr. Brandt sent me out. About 6 o'clock that was.
He sent you out of the apartment.
Told me to go see a movie.
Was he in the habit of doing that?
Only when he was expecting company, and he didn't want me to be there.
Do you know if Mr. Brandt was expecting company on this particular occasion?
Well, I couldn't say from my own knowledge, but I do know that, just before that, he got a phone call.
He received a phone call just before he sent you to the movies.
That's right, I answered the phone, and it was some girl, some young woman.
Was this young woman's voice familiar to you?
No, it wasn't. I don't think I'd ever heard her before.
I see. And you'd say this happened at around 6 p.m.?
Or a few minutes of.
Well, what happened then? Did you go to the movies as Mr. Brandt had directed you?
I did. And when I got there, I was real mad at him about it.
Why?
The picture was terrible. One of those real little stinkers.
But you sat through it?
Not all of it. I took as much as I could stand, then I left and went back to the apartment.
Now, this part's important, Mr. Kelton, so please think carefully before you answer. What time was it when you arrived back at the Brandt apartment?
Oh, I'd have to think carefully about that. It was just 7:45.
You're sure of that?
Certainly. I remember looking at my watch as I came in, thinking Mr. Brandt mightn't like it because I hadn't stayed away long enough, but I didn't care.
And what did you find when you entered the Brandt apartment? Anything out of the way or unusual?
Well, the first thing unusual was that the door was open.
Do you mean that the door was unlocked?
Not just unlocked, it was standing open.
I see. Proceed.
Well, I went inside, into the living room, and there was poor Mr. Brandt stretched out on the floor, bleeding from the neck. I thought, my God.
Just a moment. Was there anyone else in the apartment?
Yes, Miss Scott was there, and Vincent.
Who?
Sheila Vincent, Mr. Brandt's fiance.
And what were Miss Scott and Miss Vincent doing?
Well, Miss Scott was just sitting there, looking kind of dazed, but Miss Vincent was all excited. Chester is dead, she told me. She shot him.
Those were Miss Vincent's exact words?
Yes.
You're very sure of that, Mr. Kelton. You're very sure that Barbara told you, that Miss Vincent told you. Barbara did it. She shot him.
As sure as I'm standing here this minute.
Well, did you question Miss Scott about it?
I did. I asked her if it was true that she shot Mr. Brandt, but she didn't say anything. She just sat there staring at, not saying a word.
I see. Well, what happened next?
Well, next to this, I really got the cops up right away. So I called them, and they said someone. Then after they got there,
Never mind. We won't take you any farther than that. Though you did previously testify that Miss Scott was a frequent visitor to the Brandt apartment.
Oh yes, she was there 3 or 4 times a week usually.
Well, do you recall the last previous occasion of her visit before February 7th?
I do. It was just the day before that.
Which would make it February 6th.
Yes, a Tuesday.
And did anything unusual occur during that visit of Miss Scott's?
Yes.
Would you explain the incident to the court, please?
They had a quarrel, her and Mr. Brandt.
And do you know what the quarrel was about?
Yes, they were talking so loud and shouting and all. I couldn't help hearing. I was in the next room. It was about how much she needed money for someone named Janice.
This is outrageous. This is absolutely outrageous. You know, this is ridiculous. Why are we talking about this? I did it. I shot him. I did it.
Order! We'll come to order. Counselor, haven't you explained to your client, in a circumstance of first-degree indictment, the law specifically provides that she receive a jury trial whether she desires it or not?
Yes, Your Honor, I have explained that to her.
We cannot have these outbursts. I do not wish to do so, but if it becomes necessary, I shall take measures to ensure that she is forcibly restrained.
I'll try to see that there are no further outbursts, Your Honor.
Very well.
But perhaps if we could have a short recess.
It is now approaching noon. We will take our usual recess for lunch. Court is adjourned until 1:15 this afternoon.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is with great joy and pleasure that I present to you now Acts 2 and 3 of You the Jury.
Call Glenn Kelton.
Glenn Kelton. Glenn Kelton.
now for the last question and answer by witness on the record.
Question by Mr. Woodward. Do you know what the quarrel was about? Answered by witness. Yes. We were talking so loud, shouting and all. I couldn't help hearing it, though I was in the next room. It was about.
About what, Mr. Kelton?
About money. They gathered that Miss Scott was asking Mr. Brant for a loan, and he refused to give it to her.
And did you hear why she wanted the money? For what purpose?
Yes, it was for Janice. It was for someone named Janice.
Well, do you know to whom she was referring when she mentioned that name? Or Janice?
Well, I know Miss Scott has a younger sister by that name.
Objection, Your Honor. Witness's reply constitutes inference.
Sustained.
No one's known to you personally by that name.
Not to me personally, no.
We'll let that pass. Now, about the quarrel between Mr. Brant and the defendant. Was it a violent one?
Oh yes, it got pretty violent near the end. Miss Scott was shouting at Mr. Brant about how ungrateful he was after the way she worked so hard for him all those years, and he was throwing her down like that. He said he was no better than a snake.
And what did Mr. Brant reply to that?
Why? He told her if she didn't like it, she could go straight to. I can't say the rest of it. It's a bad word.
Very well. I think we can leave it up to the jury's imagination. But was anything else said during the quarrel that you think we should know about?
Well, right after that, Miss Scott told Mr. Brant that he'd be sorry, that he was going to regret his actions. Then she came stalking out and left the apartment.
I see. And this quarrel occurred on February 6th. That is, the day before Mr. Brant was shot and killed.
That's right.
Thank you. Your witness, Miss Scott.
Thank you. Mr. Kelton, you said you've known my client ever since he started working for Mr. Brant. Some 9 years?
Well, say 8.5 years.
Very well, 8.5 years. And during that time, have you ever known her to quarrel violently with her employer?
Why, only that one time. Never knew her to do anything like it before.
She never impressed you as having violent, homicidal tendencies?
For land's sakes, no.
She had always been a good and efficient and faithful employee.
As far as I know, yes. Of course, I never knew one.
Please answer my question. Yes or no?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Kelton, you said during your direct testimony that when you returned from the movie to which Mr. Brant had sent you to, that you saw my client just sitting there, looking dazed.
That's right.
And that Miss Vincent told you that my client had shot Mr. Brant.
Yes, she did.
But my client, in those first few minutes, did not say that she had shot him, did she?
Not in the first few minutes. She was too shocked to
Again,
say
I
this.
can't ask you to answer yes or no.
Well, it's only trying to tell
Yes or
you.
no, Mr. Kelton?
No.
Thank you. No further questions. You are excused.
You mean that's all the questions I'm going to be asked?
Yes, that's right. You're excused, Mr. Kelton.
Well, never expected to get off that easy.
Call Sheila Vincent.
Sheila Vincent? Sheila Vincent. But the gate is already open. If you insist.
Place your hand on the Bible. Love, ma'am.
Do you swear that the evidence you're about to give is the whole truth as you know it before your God?
I do.
State your name and place of residence.
Sheila Vincent. I reside at 200 South Broad Street.
Take the stand.
What's your occupation, Miss Vincent?
Why, I have no occupation, Mr. Woodward. Not any regular one, I mean, but I'm quite active in the Junior League and other charitable organizations.
I see. And you knew the deceased, Chester Arthur Brant?
I did.
You were on familiar terms with him. You knew him for some time.
I met him about 3 years ago. My father introduced us. Chester and my father were partners in some kind of business deal at that time.
And you later became engaged to Mr. Brant.
That's right. Our engagement was announced about 6 months ago.
Then you were, and until his death, continued to be on intimate terms with him.
Yes.
You saw each other quite frequently, I presume.
Oh, yes. Hardly a day went by that we didn't see each other. He would call for me, or I would just drop in at his apartment.
Then you were in the habit of dropping by his apartment regularly. Now, was that by appointment?
Not necessarily. Our arrangement was quite informal. I'd sometimes pop in on him without even letting him know I was coming, if I happened to be in the neighborhood, and Chester would do the same at my house.
Now, you're also fairly acquainted with the defendant in this trial, Barbara Scott.
I am.
She's present in this courtroom, and you recognize her. Please, point her out to the court.
That's she.
Now, you've also known the defendant for a number of years. You've seen her frequently around Chester's apartment.
Oh, yes. She was around Chester's apartment a lot, you know. I mean, in connection with her job.
Yes, of course. And you'd say your relationship with her was on a friendly basis.
Oh, yes. Very friendly. I always had the greatest admiration for her. She was so efficient and seemed so devoted to Chester.
So that you bore no animosity, would not wish to injure her or do her harm in any way.
Why, of course not, Mr. Woodward. Why would I wish to do her harm?
Just answer the questions, Miss Vincent.
Oh, sorry.
Now, I'm going to ask you about the events on the evening of last February 7th. You recall those events, don't you?
Yes, Oh!
I know this must be painful for you, but in the interest of justice.
Of course. I don't know what made me act like such a goose. I'll try not to let it happen again.
Thank you. No. Token of my affection. Now, did you visit Chester's apartment on the evening of February 7th last?
Yes, I did.
And was that by appointment?
No, it was one of those spur-of-the-moment things I was telling you about before. I had a committee meeting for the Junior League not far from Chester's apartment, and when the meeting was over, I decided to run over and ask his opinion on one of the points the committee was trying to decide.
And do you recall what time it was when you arrived back at his apartment?
Yes, it was 20 minutes to 8.
You're sure of that? Exactly 20 minutes of 8.
Yes, I know that because when I got to the apartment building, I asked the cab driver what time it was. I knew that Chester usually had his dinner at 7, and I didn't want to disturb him in the middle of it.
Of course. So you asked the time of the driver of the cab that brought you there, and he told you that it was 20 minutes of 8.
That's right.
And after that, you went straight up to the Brandt's apartment.
Yes.
What did you find when you entered that apartment?
Well, when I got upstairs, and just as I started to let myself in...
And just was the door open?
No, it was locked, but I had my own key. Chester wanted me to have it.
Continue.
Just as I started to unlock the door, I heard what sounded like a shot from inside the apartment. Oh, you can imagine how startled and unnerved I was, but I managed to get the door open, and I saw...
Before you tell us that, would you describe the layout of the apartment for us? The front door opens on what?
On a small foyer, and beyond that is the living room.
So that from the corridor outside the door, one could see directly into the living room without obstruction?
That's right.
Continue. What did you see?
I saw Chester lying on the floor, and Barbara with a gun in her hand, bending over him.
And from the time that you heard what you thought sounded like a shot from inside the apartment until you got the door open and described what you just saw to us, what you just described to us, how much time would you say elapsed, Miss Vincent?
Oh, it was very little. Just a matter of moments.
Not so much as a minute?
It couldn't have been more than 10 or 15 seconds at the most.
I see. And you got the door open, and you saw the defendant with a gun in her hand, bending over the body of Chester Brandt.
That's right.
Was there anyone else in the apartment?
No, no one else.
What happened then?
I ran inside and said something like, "My God, Barbara, what happened? Is he dead?"
Well, did she reply to that question?
No, she seemed unable to speak. She just nodded her head. And I said, "It wasn't you, Barbara. You didn't shoot him." And again, she just nodded her head.
Now, just a minute. When you say that the defendant nodded her head, do you mean that she nodded it up and down, signifying yes?
That's right.
All right. Proceed.
Why, I don't remember anything else happening until Mr. Kelton got there.
And when was that? How long after your arrival?
It's hard for me to remember exactly. I was so upset, so appalled by what had happened.
Of course, but do you think it could have been about 10 minutes after your arrival? Maybe 15?
I don't think it was that long. I'd say closer to 5 minutes.
Now, Miss Vincent, it's been previously testified to that about 6 p.m. on the evening of February 7th, Mr. Brandt received a phone call from a young woman. Were you that young woman, Miss Vincent?
No, I didn't call Chester at all that day.
See. It's also been previously testified to that the day before his death, that would be the 6th, Mr. Brandt and the defendant engaged in a violent quarrel.
Oh,
in
yes, I know all about that.
which
Chester told me when I saw him that evening.
he told you what the quarrel was about?
Yes. It was because she wanted money from him and he refused to give it to her. She wanted it for her sister
No,
Janice.
no. That's not the entire truth. You know it.
Farmer, you promise me you won't cause any more disturbances.
I'm so sorry, Miss Vincent. Please, continue. You were saying that the defendant wanted money from Mr. Brandt for her sister, Janice.
That's right. So that she could keep Janice in school.
And how do you mean by that?
Well, as Chester told it to me.
Objection, Your Honor. Aren't we going pretty far afield here?
I think not, Miss Scott. This testimony seems to touch on motive for the crime. I believe I will allow it. Objection overruled.
Please, continue, Miss Vincent.
Chester told me that Janice was in trouble in school. Barbara kept her in some expensive finishing school out of the state, and they were threatening to expel her. It seemed she had gotten herself heavily in debt and didn't have the money to pay it.
And the defendant asked Mr. Brandt for that money, and he refused to give it to her, and that is what caused the quarrel.
That's right. Chester told me he was getting a little tired of supporting the whole darn Scott family.
Those were his words to you.
They were, and that was his attitude. I'm not saying he was right in it, but there was...
Never mind. I do think that's all the questions I have. Your witness, Miss Scott.
Thank you. Miss Vincent, you said that when you entered the Brandt apartment, you saw my client bending over the body of Chester Arthur Brandt with a pistol in her hand.
That's right.
Wait, you did not see her fire that pistol.
No.
You did not see her shoot Mr. Brandt, and you did not see Mr. Brandt fall onto the floor.
No, but
But what?
I heard that shot and I rushed right in.
Let me refresh your memory, Miss Vincent. You said you heard what sounded like a shot. I may suggest to you that what sounded like a shot to you might have been an auto backfiring in the street. Mightn't it?
Hardly,
Why not?
because the sound came from inside the apartment.
And you're sure of that? Absolutely sure it couldn't have come from the street?
Well, I'm practically sure.
I see. Practically. But again, I repeat, you did not actually see my client fire the shot that killed Chester Arthur Brandt.
No.
Thank you. Now, Miss Vincent, you stated during your direct testimony that when you arrived at the Brandt apartment, the only people present were the deceased and my client.
That's right.
How do you know that?
What?
Did you make an inspection of the apartment? A search?
Of course not, but there was...
It's a large apartment containing 9 rooms and 4 baths.
I believe so, yes.
Did you look through each room and bath and ascertain yourself that no one was there?
No.
There must be a great many closets in an apartment that size. Did you open each closet door and satisfy yourself that no one was hiding inside?
Certainly not.
Then how can you say that there was no one in the apartment but the deceased and my client?
I didn't see anyone
You
else.
didn't see anyone. Miss Vincent, are you not prepared to state on your own sworn oath that I wasn't in the Brandt apartment during the time in question?
You, Miss Scott?
Or anyone else I may care to mention? Please answer the question.
No. I suppose I wouldn't be prepared to state that.
Then you now agree that your previous statement was not strictly accurate and ought to be disregarded.
Why, perhaps technically yes, but...
Yes, thank you very much. Chester Brandt's fiancée. You were well acquainted with his private affairs?
Yes, fairly well acquainted with them, I would say.
For instance, you were familiar with the terms of his will.
I know something about them, yes.
Will you please tell the court if you inherited that will?
Don't answer that question, Miss Vincent. Your Honor, that's objected to on the grounds that it's incompetent, irrelevant, immaterial, and on the further ground that no proper foundation was laid for the line of questioning.
What is your purpose in these questions, Miss Scott?
To show self-interest on part of the witness. I submit, Your Honor, that I have... Excuse me. It is perfectly proper for you to pursue this line. She has self-interest, Your Honor. It has to be necessary to question.
Isn't that far-fetched, Your Honor? No matter what answers are brought out, they cannot possibly bear on the basic elements of this trial. I submit that nothing can be accomplished except thereby to impugn the integrity of the people's witnesses.
I think not, Mr. Woodward. I think I'm going to allow a line of questioning. Objection overruled.
Respectfully ask for an exception on that ruling, Your Honor.
It will be so noted on the record.
Answer the question, Ms. Eason. Do you or do you not inherit under the terms of Chester Brandt's will?
Yes, I do.
To how far an extent?
I believe I'm to get 1/3 of the residual estate.
1/3. And Mr. Brandt was quite a wealthy man, wasn't he? The estate will run over $1 million?
No, not that much.
Over $500,000?
Perhaps.
And you will come into 1/3 of it.
Yes, but if you're intimating that would have any bearing whatsoever on my testimony.
I'm intimating nothing, Miss Vincent. I am simply trying to bring out the facts in this case. All the facts. Thank you. No further questions.
You're excused, Miss Vincent. Your Honor, the people rest.
The defense ready to present its case.
Your Honor, if we might have a brief recess.
For what purpose?
Frankly, Your Honor, I am trying to prevail upon my client to take the witness stand, but she so far refuses to do so.
Haven't you other witnesses you can call in the meantime?
No, Your Honor, the defense has no other witnesses.
Hey!
Let me through, let me through!
Here, miss! You can't do that!
Janice?
Can't you see our court is in session?
Let her through, bailiff.
No, don't. She has nothing to do with this. She's
Order.
too young. She wouldn't understand.
Order.
Even she has to be at school.
Order. We will come to order.
Your Honor, if I might have the court's indulgence for just a few moments. There seems to be a development that might vitally affect the defense's case.
Very well. We will have a brief recess. Let everyone remain seated. The jury will not leave its box.
Thank you. Let her through, bailiff. I'll vouch for her.
Yes, ma'am.
Barbara.
No, you shouldn't be here. You need to go away.
Barbara, but I have something.
No! Keep out of this.
I can't, Barbara.
All right. Wait here one moment. Your Honor, might I have a brief word with you, but we're still in recess?
Do you wish to go into my chamber?
That won't be necessary, Your Honor. The defense now does have someone to put on the stand, but I ask for a little time to hear her story before I party testify.
How much time, Miss Scott?
Why? I don't know. I don't want to impose on the patience of the court.
We adjourn for the day and reconvene tomorrow morning. Let's give you enough time.
Yes, I'm sure it will, Your Honor. And I want to thank you again, Your Honor, for being so patient and understanding of my inexperience.
Miss Scott, the court is only interested that the ends of justice are properly served here. You or anyone else will give equal consideration toward that end.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Court is adjourned until 10 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Thank you.
Mr. Woodward, I have those precedents to ask you about.
Fine. Fine. I'll be with you in a minute. Edith, I want to congratulate you on conducting a very sound defense.
Thank you.
Too bad it has to be in a losing cause.
Don't be so sure. You might be in for a rude surprise or two.
Really, I won't mind. I don't think I'd mind at all to see you go to acquittal.
You don't mean that, Alan.
No, I do. After all, it's only another case to me, but I know how much more it means to you. So keep punching.
It's very kind of you, Alan. Very sweet.
Right. Miss Carver. Miss Residence.
Yes, very good. And I think you'll find them quite interesting.
Edith?
How you feeling today?
Never mind about me. I want to ask you again, for the last time. Please don't let Janice testify.
It's no use wasting your breath, Barbara. She's going to testify.
But don't you see what a mess this is going to make of everything?
I don't. I see what mess we're in now, and I'm trying to fix it.
Edith. Darling, not this way. Believe me, I've tried everything.
It's here. You're being very brave, right? Very noble. But also a little silly.
All rise. The Court of General Session, 3rd District is now in session. The Honorable Judy Finley presiding. Be seated.
The defense ready to present its case.
The defense is ready, Your Honor. Call Janice Scott.
Janice Scott? Arrested. Now.
Place your hand on the Bible. Do you swear that the evidence you're about to give is the whole truth as you know it before your God? Yes. State your name and place of residence. Janice Scott, 76 Monroe Street. Take the stand.
Janice, how old are you?
19.
And your occupation?
I'm a student at University of Girls.
That is a school located outside of the city?
Yes, it is.
And you've been a resident there for some time now?
Why, yes, for over a year now. Outside vacation, of course.
And you were acquainted with the defendant in this trial, Barbara Scott?
Of course. She's my sister.
And do you also have a father and mother?
No, they both died years ago. I only have two sisters, Barbara and you.
This school that you're now attending, Janice, Greenwood, is an expensive one by the usual standard.
Why, yes, I suppose you call it quite expensive by the usual standards.
How have you been able to maintain yourself there?
Oh, the money came from Barbara. She's been supporting me ever since I was 2.
Barbara. You refer to Barbara Scott, the defendant in this trial.
That's right. Oh, and lately you've been supporting me too, Edith.
I see.
Since you've begun to build up your practice, I mean.
We need to go into that. But the bulk of your support for your schooling and the rest of it has over the years come from your sister Barbara.
That's right.
Now, Janice, it has been testified to in this trial that you have lately gone into considerable debt. Is that true?
Yes, it is true. But you see, I was only trying to keep up with other girls. I mean, most of them came from wealthy families,
Never
and
mind that, please. That information is extraneous here. But Janice, I'm going to ask you if you are acquainted with the deceased, Chester Arthur Brink.
Yes. Yes, I was.
How did that acquaintance come about?
Through Barbara. I met him at the office where she worked.
I see. And prior to his decease, when was the last time you saw him?
Late December, when I was home for the Christmas holidays.
Will you please describe to the court, in your own words, those circumstances?
All right. Mr. Brent invited me and Barbara to his apartment. Barbara had some errands to run, so we agreed to meet at the apartment. Other people were supposed to be there as well. Some kind of party, I suppose. Anyways, I got there first,
You
and
were alone with Chester Brand?
yes, except for the butler. He was there around somewhere. Then he...
I know this is difficult for you, Janice. Please continue.
He tried to make love to me. He took me in his arms and then he...
You resisted him.
Yes, I was embarrassed. I thought I'd die. I didn't know what else...
happened next?
Barbara walked into the apartment.
While Mr. Brant was forcing his attentions on you.
Yes, she was furious. She called me an evil old man and then she took me home.
I see. And when was the next time you saw or heard from Mr. Brant?
He called me in my school the day before he was killed.
He telephoned you on February 6th?
Yes, he heard that I'd been in some financial difficulties and he made me able to help.
He offered to help you?
Yes, provided I can get away from school and come to him to talk about it.
And what did you reply to that offer?
I told him I'd try.
Try to get away from school and come in to talk about it.
Yes, you see, I was desperate at the time, Edith, and I didn't know what else to do.
Never mind that, please. And did you succeed in getting away?
Yes, the next day, the 7th.
You came into town then and went to the Brant apartment?
Yes, I called him first from the station to tell him I would come.
Do you know what time that was?
Well, my train got in around 6 and called him right after that.
Continue, please.
Well, I got Mr. Brown on the phone, and he told me to get there as soon as I could. I told him no, I look like a mess, and I want to get something to eat first, and change. I told him I'd be there in about an hour and a half or so. Anyways, I got home to change.
Just a minute. Did the defendant or any other member of your family know that you had left school and were now in town?
No, I knew Barbara when I recruited.
When you went home to change, Barbara wasn't there.
Why, no one was there. I made sure of that before I went in.
All right. Continue.
Well, I got something to eat at a restaurant, then took a cab to Mr. Brandt's apartment.
Do you know what time it was when you arrived there?
Yes, I do. I was going up the elevator, wondering how late I was, and it was exactly 25 minutes late.
Now this is extremely important, Janice. You are sure that it was exactly 25 minutes late. Your watch couldn't have been fast or slow.
It couldn't possibly have been. It was a very accurate watch, and I set it just a short time before, by regular time.
I see. And you're willing to repeat under your own sworn oath that it was neither 21 nor 22 nor 23, but exactly 25 minutes late.
Yes, exactly 25 minutes of it.
All right. What happened when you went up to the apartment?
I pushed the buzzer on the door, but there was no answer. So I tried the door and I found it unlocked, so I went inside.
What did you see when you went inside?
I saw Mr. Brandt lying there on the floor, dead.
How did you know he was dead?
It was obvious the position he was in. His eyes were sort of glossy. It was obvious.
You went in all the way to the living room from the foyer.
Yes, just to make sure. I could tell that he'd been shot in the neck, and the gun was lying there right beside him.
The gun was lying on the floor of the living room?
Yes, just a few feet away from the body, I suppose.
All right. Just a moment, Janice. Number 2, Mrs. Hegarty. Is this People's Exhibit number 2, Janice? Pistol. Is this the pistol that you saw lying on the floor of the apartment?
Why, it looks like it. I didn't examine it very closely at the time.
Thank you. All right. So you went into the living room, saw Mr. Brant lying on the floor dead, the pistol right beside him. What did you do next?
I ran out as fast as my feet could carry me.
You didn't touch anything in the apartment? The pistol, for instance?
Well, I should say not. When I found out what had happened, I was petrified. I could scarcely breathe. My one impulse was to get out of there as soon as I could.
So you left the apartment just as soon as you realized Mr. Brant was dead, had been shot.
That's right.
How long do you estimate that you were in the apartment altogether?
Oh, it couldn't have been long. About 2-3 minutes, something like that.
Then if you entered the apartment at 25 minutes of 8, you couldn't have left any time later than 20 minutes of.
Yes, that could be about right.
All right. What did you do after you left the apartment?
I went back up to school.
That same night?
Yes, I took a late train and got there about 1 in the morning.
I see. And either then or later, did you tell the defendant or any other member of your family that you had been in the Brant apartment the evening of his death?
No, not until watching this courtroom yesterday afternoon.
Thank you, Janice. Now, about this debt of yours, has it been paid off?
Not yet.
The money was not provided to you by Barbara.
She told me she wasn't able to raise it, but I'm paying it off now, you see.
You're paying it off yourself.
Yes, a little each month out of my allowance, and I'm also waiting on papers at school. The dean agreed I could do that.
Thank you, Janice. I don't believe I have any more questions. You may cross-examine Mr. Woodward.
Thank you. Now, Janice, if I may call you that.
Of course, I've been calling you that for years, Mr. Woodward.
Yes, I suppose I have. Well, now, Janice, you said you didn't tell your sisters about your visit to Mr. Brandt's apartment the evening he was killed.
No, I did not.
How were you able to keep it from him?
What do you mean, how?
Well, wouldn't the authorities at school have informed your sisters if you were absent without permission?
Oh, that. The authorities at school never knew it was absent.
And how were you able to keep it from them?
Why, I didn't leave school until it was over that day. And I got back early the next morning. My roommate covered for me. She was the only one who knew.
See, but they'll know now.
Why, yes, I suppose so. I suppose I lose my past privileges for a while, something like that.
I see. Now, Janice, I want to go back to the question of time. I wonder if you realize just how important that is.
I guess it's pretty important.
It's vitally important. Do you understand that a person's life might depend on it?
Really, Mr. Woodward?
Really? Now, knowing that, don't you want to qualify your testimony about being certain that you arrived at the Brandt's apartment at exactly 25 minutes of 8?
No, I did not.
I ask you to consider, Janice, there are any number of ways in which you could have been wrong. For instance, you could have read your watch wrong.
I didn't.
Or it could have been set wrong.
It wasn't. I'm positive 25 minutes of 8.
Or, in the weeks that have passed since the incident, you could have formed a false impression at the time. Now, your memory may be playing tricks on you.
It isn't. I'm positive. It was 25 minutes of 8.
Despite the importance that you now know attaches to it, you persist in making such positive assertions.
Yes, I do.
No further questions, Janice.
Call James Aloysius Perry.
James Aloysius Perry. James Aloysius Perry.
Place your hand on the Bible. Do you swear that the evidence you're about to give, the whole truth as you know it, before your God?
Sure. What have I got to lose?
State your name and place of residence.
James Aloysius Perry, but everyone calls me Jimmy. Place of residence, 808 East Lakeside Avenue.
Take the stand.
Now, Mr. Perry.
Call me Jimmy. In a minute.
Very well, Jimmy. What is your occupation?
Elevator operator. Great occupations for ups and downs.
And where have you been most recently, of course?
420 Park Drive West.
There's an apartment building and the residence of the late Chester Arthur Brandt.
Right. Real class too. One of the niftiest spots in town.
Have you been employed there long?
Couple of years, more or less. Say 2.5.
Very well, 2.5 years. And during that time, you've become familiar with those who have called on Mr. Brandt?
With some of them. The regular ones, you know?
And was Miss Sheila Vincent one of those regular ones?
Yeah. I got to be real, pally with her.
Probably.
You know, she'd come around, I'd tell her the latest jokes, and she'd laugh.
Now, Jimmy, do you recall the evening of February 7th last?
Yeah, I recall it real good. On account of it being the night the big man got knocked out.
The big man?
Mr. Brent. That's what we called him around the house.
Let's see. And do you recall taking Miss Vincent up that evening?
Uh-huh. I took her up.
What time was that?
Oh, it was...
I want you to be very careful in answering this question, Jimmy. A great deal hinges on it.
I'm not to be careful. I'll tell you right off. It was 7:25.
How are you able to recall this time so accurately?
Well, I'll tell you. Take Miss Vincent up to Brandt's for him, and I get back down. See? When I come back down, Mike Floto, that's the doorman at 412. Mike is waiting, wanting to know what time it is. So I take a peek at my ticker, and I tell him it's 7:25.
Thank you. So you looked at your watch to tell the doorman the time, and it said it was 7:25. How were you able to remember this incident all these weeks?
Oh, I'm real good at remembering things. I got one of those phonographic memories.
Very well, Jimmy. But suppose I suggest to you, Jimmy, that you are mistaken. That instead of it being 7:25 when you took Miss Vincent up, it was actually 20 of 8. What would you say?
I'd say you're off your rocker. You couldn't have been 20 of 8.
Couldn't have been?
Impossible.
Why?
I wasn't there at 20 of 8. My relief showed up and I went off duty at 7:30.
Thank you, Jimmy. No further questions. You may cross-examine Mr. Woodward.
Thank you. So, Mr. Perry, sorry, Jimmy, did you give this information of yours to the police at the time of the original investigation?
No,
Why not?
they didn't ask me.
And who asked you to give it here in this courtroom now?
No one. I got in touch with Miss Scott myself. On my own account.
You volunteered the information to her.
That's right.
And when was that?
Last night.
Why did you wait so long to get in touch with her?
It didn't seem important enough to be to stick my neck out. Until I read that story in the paper last
What
night.
story?
The one with Miss Vincent, thanks to France for it. 20 of 8. Seeing how important that time giving was, might save a person's life.
Do you mean to say that you volunteered your information to Miss Scott for the express purpose of disproving Miss Vincent's testimony?
It's so hard to understand about that, but she was lying.
She was lying. How do you know that?
She says she went up for 20 of 8 and swears herself black and blue. When I know she really went up.
But how do you know that, granted your recollection of the time is even accurate, that she wasn't honestly mistaken?
No, but come on.
It's possible, isn't it?
Sure, it's possible. Anything's possible. It's possible I could sit on a hen's egg and make it hatch. But I wouldn't want to bet on the chances.
No further questions, Jimmy. You're excused.
Thank you, Your Honor, for the use of the hall. Thank you.
What a joke.
Your Honor, the defense would like to put Barbara Scott on the stand.
Just a moment. It is now approaching noon. Rather than let the defendant start testimony and have to interrupt it for lunch recess, we will take recess now. Court is adjourned until 1:15 this afternoon.
Oh no,
Are we all ready? I'm ready, dear. How about you? Are you ready for your big ordeal?
This won't be an ordeal. I've already been through mine. And I realize now that I went through it needlessly.
You made a mistake, Father. An honest mistake. But I don't want you to think it's clear sailing from now on. There's still a great deal ahead of us. A great deal can still go wrong.
I'm not afraid. Not now. Even if the worst should happen, I'll be alright.
I hope you're right. But as I see it now, everything now depends on your testimony. On how well you tell your story. Whether or not the jury believes it.
The truth, Eden. Now we're going to give them the truth, and what more can we do than that?
The truth. But sometimes it's very hard for people to decide what the truth is. Especially when they're sitting on juries. Let's have a seat.
Not again.
May I get a few please?
Miss, you have to secure the rest of spectators if you want.
what? With my sisters.
It goes against rules of the court.
Just a moment, bailiff. I'll see if I can get her permission.
Oh, please do it. So do I do with Barbara.
Oh, she's asleep? Mrs. Haggerty? Is it all right if Janice is at the defense table with us?
Oh, it's all right with me if Judge Finlay has no objections.
I'm pretty sure she will.
Go ahead.
Mrs. Haggerty, it's all right, bailiff.
Okay. Pass through.
Barbara, how are you?
Never mind about me, darling, alright? I don't want you to worry about me.
I've talked to you alone to try to explain why I did what I
morning in court.
So you understand then? Forgive me?
Of course I understand. And there's nothing for me to forgive.
Barbara, that's such a load off my mind. And I know, I'm sure, everything went well right here.
I told you I don't want you to worry about that right now.
Maybe it would be better if the two of you did a little more worrying. Nothing is sure in a law court. Nothing until the jury decides its verdict.
All rise.
Court of General Sessions, 3rd District is now in session. The Honorable Judy Finley presiding. Be seated.
Didn't feel anything.
The defense is ready to resume this case.
Yes, Your Honor, the defense is ready.
Proceed.
Barbara Scott, please take the stand.
Place your hand on the Bible. Do you swear that the evidence you're about to give is the whole truth as you know it before your God?
I swear.
State your name and place of residence.
Barbara Scott, 76 Monroe Street.
Take the stand.
Barbara, will you please tell the court your occupation?
I'm the secretary.
And where were you most recently employed?
Until his death, I was employed by Chester. I was on call, any hour, day or night. I had to do all of Mr. Brandt's filthy work. I can honestly say I earned my salary. Every penny of it.
From the sound of it, you didn't seem to like your job very much.
I loathed it.
Or your employer.
I loathed him too.
And yet you kept this job for more than 12 years. Why?
I suppose because the pay was good. I needed the money.
You needed the money for your own expenses.
Partly.
And partly for what else?
Why? Is it necessary to go into that?
I believe it is. I believe it is necessary for the court to know about your life, your background. Now, Barbara, will you please explain to the court why this money you could earn from Mr. Brandt is so important to you?
I needed it for expenses. Family expenses.
So that you could provide a decent home for your 2 younger sisters.
Yes.
And so that they got a decent education.
I tried to do that, yes.
And isn't it true that you sent one of those sisters to college and then through law school at a very steady and considerable expense to yourself?
Oh, that isn't entirely true. She helped out herself by getting odd jobs here.
But the bulk of her support came from you.
I suppose so, yes.
And that is the only reason you stayed in a job you loathed, with a man you loathed, for nearly 13 years.
Yes.
Barbara, how old are you?
35.
And how long have your parents been dead?
For 17 years.
Both of them?
Yes. They died together in an automobile accident.
You were 18 years old.
Yes.
And since then, you have been the main, and most of the time, the only support for your little family since then.
Do we have to dwell so much on the past?
Please answer my question.
I was the oldest, so I decided to get a job.
As a matter of fact, were you trained for any kind of work when your parents died?
No. But I learned. I went to secretarial school.
And where did you obtain the money to do that?
I borrowed it from relatives.
And are you still in debt to those relatives?
No. I managed to pay the money back. All of it.
I see. Now, Janice, number 2 is assigned. Just one moment. I ask you to take a look at this pistol. It is marked People's Exhibit number 2. Is this pistol familiar to you?
Yes. It's the one I purchased.
It's been licensed to you by the police department?
Yes.
When did you purchase it?
About 3 years ago.
And from that time until the death of Chester Arthur Brandt, was this pistol continuously in your possession?
No.
It was in your possession only part of that time?
No. It wasn't in my possession at all. Except technically, of course.
In whose possession was it?
In Mr. Brandt's.
Will you please explain to the court why a pistol purchased and licensed in your name was under the possession of Chester Arthur Bryant?
Well, it's quite simple. He wanted a gun around the apartment because of the large amounts of cash he usually kept there, so he asked me to purchase one for him.
Why did he get one for himself?
He knew the police would not give him a license. He had a criminal record.
I see. So you bought it for him to keep around his apartment.
Yes.
And did Mr. Brent have a regular spot where he kept the pistol?
Yes, under some papers in the top drawer of his desk.
And as far as you know, it was kept there up to and including the evening of his death.
As far as I know, yes.
To the best of your knowledge, Barbara, was anyone else aware of this pistol's whereabouts?
Well, at least one other person was aware.
And you know this of your own knowledge, not what somebody else may have told you?
No, of my own knowledge.
Who was that other person?
Miss Vincent.
Miss Vincent, that is, Chester Brandt's fiancée, was aware that that pistol was regularly kept in that drawer.
Yes. He had shown it to her once in my presence, about a year ago. And he explained to her that he had kept it there because he was afraid of a holdup.
I see. Now, Barbara, testimony has been given here that on February 6th, you had a quarrel with Mr. Brandt.
It's true, I did.
Is that quarrel about money?
Yes, I had asked him for a loan for $400.
I see. And Mr. Brandt refused to give you this loan?
It wasn't so much that he refused. It was his attitude.
What was that?
He became insulting. He called me names.
That made you angry.
It made me furious. I lost my temper, which is something I often try not to do with Mr. Brandt.
And do you remember what you said as a result of losing your temper?
No, but I can imagine it wasn't very late.
And you do not deny having this quarrel with him?
No, I don't.
No. What was this money for?
It was for Janice. I wanted to pay off her debts.
I see. Now, Barbara, testimony has been given here that this morning by Janice Scott about the Christmas holidays. Was that true?
Yes, completely so.
So you arrived at the Brandt apartment. Incidentally, how did you get in?
I got in using the key Mr. Brandt had given me.
I see. And you saw Janice Scott and Brandt together.
Yes, he was trying to embrace her and she was struggling against him.
And what happened when you entered the apartment?
He let go of her immediately, of course, and I took her home.
Without saying anything to Mr. Brandt about it?
That's right. I never spoke to him about it. Not then, or ever. I only tried to make sure he never got another chance to be alone with her again.
I see. Now, Barbara, I'm going to ask you to remember the incidents that happened on February 7th.
All right?
Please describe to the court, in your own words, those incidents that now bear the case before us.
I finished dinner at about 7:15.
You dined in your own home?
No, at a restaurant. Having nothing to do, I decided to head to Mr. Brandt's apartment and join purchase agreements for parcels of real estate he was negotiating to sell. So I took the bus, and when I got there,
What time was that?
I'm sorry, I can't give you the exact time.
You said you finished your dinner at about 7:15. How long would it have taken you to make the trip by bus to the Brandt apartment?
About 15 to 20 minutes.
All right. Was Jimmy Perry still operating the elevator when you arrived?
No, Harry Summers, his relief.
So that must mean you arrived sometime after 7:30.
I suppose so, yes.
Proceed, please.
When I got off the bus and started heading to the house, I saw Janice running out.
You saw Janice Scott running out of the house in which Mr. Brandt had his apartment?
Yes, I was very surprised to see her there when she should have been at that school. But I decided to call out to her, to greet her. But something had stopped me. And I'm not sure what, but something had stopped me. It's probably the strange expression she had on her face.
How do you mean strange?
Excited? Scared? Like she'd have been in terrible trouble.
I see.
She looked around for a cab, I suppose, and then ran off in the opposite direction.
Without seeing or speaking to you?
That's right.
Continue.
I was alarmed. I felt sure something had happened in the apartment. So I ran up there.
You went inside using your key.
No, the door was standing open. I remember thinking Janice must have forgotten to close it.
So you got in and saw what?
I saw Mr. Brandt sprawled out on the floor, and the pistol lying beside him.
Just a minute. Did you see anyone else besides yourself and Mr. Brandt in the living room?
No, no one. As far as I knew, I was alone there with his body.
I see. So you ran to him, and then what else did you do?
I knelt beside him, and I made sure he was dead. Then I picked up the pistol and started to.
Why did you do that?
I'd rather not say.
Very well. Let it pass for the moment. Continue.
As I say, I picked up the pistol and began to examine it. And Sheila Vincent walked in.
Did you see from which direction Sheila Vincent came in from?
No, my back was toward her.
You did not see her enter through the apartment door.
No.
Now, I ask you to consider, Barbara, could Sheila Vincent been elsewhere in the apartment when you were in the living room?
She could have been.
And how was she dressed?
Well, I haven't a very clear recollection of the dress she wore, but I remember she wore a hat and gloves.
Gloves. You were positive on that point.
Yes.
I see. And did she speak to you when she entered?
Yes. She seemed very shocked to see Mr. Brandt on the floor, and she kept asking me if I had done it.
And did you reply to that question?
Not in so many words, but I let her think.
You let her think that you were willing to assume the guilt.
Yes.
And when Mr. Kelton, the butler, and the police asked you the same, you answered the same.
Yes.
And when the police had you sign a statement to that effect, you did so willingly, without coercion on their part.
Yes, I did.
Now, I ask you, Barbara, was that statement you signed, that confession of your guilt, the truth?
No, it was not.
The truth is in the testimony you have just given to the court.
Yes, it is.
And you now denounce and confirm as untrue any previous statements given to the contrary.
Yes, I do.
Now, Barbara, I ask you why. Why you sought to lie and give the impression that you were guilty of the murder of Chester Arthur Brandt.
Please, do I have to answer that?
Yes. If you don't, I will put it to you in form of suggestion.
I lied because I thought Janice had killed him.
You wanted to protect your younger sister.
Yes.
So you took on what you assumed was her burden of guilt.
Yes. What I foolishly assumed. I should have known better. I should have had more faith in her, but it just looked so bad for her. Running out of the apartment with that terrible expression on her face, and then I remembered the incident during the Christmas holidays, and I just wanted to protect her, to shield her.
As you've always done, Barbara. I don't believe I have any more questions. Thank you. You may cross-examine Mr. Woodward.
The people have no questions.
What's no questions at all?
None, Your Honor.
Very well. You're excused, Miss Scott.
The defense rests, Your Honor.
Will you, Miss Scott, and you, Mr. Woodward, please approach the bench. These remarks are not to be recorded. Your Honor. During the day. Wait, okay. It is now about 2:30. If we adjourn for the day and reconvene tomorrow morning, we'll have to give you enough time to prepare for something else.
Yes, Your Honor. Ample time.
And for me. I do expect my semi-naps to be unusually brief.
Very well. Court is adjourned until 10 o'clock tomorrow morning.
And so, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you have heard the testimony given here by the police department and the other witnesses, tending to confirm the guilt of the defendant, Barbara Scott. But that testimony, we now know, is based on a lie. Yes, she lied when she let Glenn Kelton and Sheila Vincent believe that she was guilty of the murder of Chester Arthur Brandt. She lied when she signed her name to a statement given to her by the police, a statement she knew to be completely untrue. She lied when she let this trial begin and to continue. She lied when, if she had spoken the truth, there might not, and in my opinion, there would not have been a trial at all. Now, to lie, of course, is reprehensible. It is morally wrong. But I'm sure you know from your own lives, from your own experiences, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure you know that this moral wrong of lying is outweighed by greater consideration, by deeper human instinct. It may be outweighed by the instinct of self-preservation, or by the instinct to preserve, to save the loved one. And I ask each of you, sir, you, madam, if not sometime in your lives you decided to tell a lie, for what you believe to be, mistakenly perhaps, a sufficiently compelling reason. And can you imagine any reason more compelling, more overwhelming than the desire of Barbara Scott to protect and perhaps save the very life of her younger sister? This is only half her age, whom she's brought up and supported, whom she's lavished with love and tenderness that could not have been exceeded by the most devoted parent. So Barbara Scott lied. But you're not here to judge, to punish her for that. She has judged and punished herself already, and believe me, to a far greater degree than you could ever determine. You are here for one purpose, and one purpose only: to decide whether she is innocent or guilty of the murder of Chester Arthur Brant. Now, you're probably asking yourselves, ladies and gentlemen, if Barbara Scott didn't kill him, then who did? It is not within the province of this trial to answer that question, nor is it an obligation of the defense to supply an alternate, more likely candidate as the killer. The question here to be determined is not who killed Chester Brant, but simply, did Barbara Scott kill him? And yet, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I'm sure that from the latter portion of this trial, you can make a reasonable guess as to the identity of the actual killer. That should not concern you. But let me just say that the properly constituted authorities, the District Attorney's Office and the Police Department, will take the necessary measures given by that testimony at the conclusion of this trial. And now, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I come to an end of my remarks to you. I do not intend to bore you or insult your intelligence by delivering a lengthy and flowery, impassioned peroration. I am content to let the facts, as you have heard them here, speak for themselves. I am content to let you judge the testimony for its content, its truth or untruth. And I'm sure that when you do that, you will arrive at the correct conclusion, the only possible conclusion. I'm sure that when you decide your verdict and choose to deliver it, you will in effect say, to my older sister, Barbara Scott, the defendant in this trial, you lied. That was a foolish and sinful thing to do. But you did not kill, which would have been far, far worse. Go thou and sin no more. Thank you.
Are the people ready? Did I sum it up?
Yes, the people are ready, Your Honor.
Proceed.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, like my distinguished young colleague, the attorney for the defense, and incidentally, I want to take this opportunity to commend her for the competent, intelligent way in which, during this trial, she discharged her duties as an officer. Like Miss Scott, I'm content to let the facts, the testimony, speak for themselves. It's a truism in this country, and it's to our everlasting credit and glory as a nation that it should be a truism. That a defendant, any defendant in any trial, is presumed to be innocent until proved guilty, beyond any reasonable doubt. There are other countries that we all know of, to our sorrow, where the reverse is true. But thank God not here. It was my contention at the outset of this trial that the defendant, Barbara Scott, was guilty as charged in her indictment. It was my honest and firm conviction she was indeed guilty. And to that end, I produced a number of witnesses who described a set of circumstances, all intended to confirm the defendant's guilt. But the defense produced other witnesses to counter the testimony of the people's. And if in your deliberations you find that the testimony of the defense's witnesses was more accurate, more truthful, more to be relied upon than that of the people's, then you must, in all conscience and under your sworn oaths, return a verdict of not guilty. Perhaps you think it strange, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, that I, a prosecutor, an assistant district attorney, should be saying such things. Perhaps you think it's our duties as servants of the people to secure convictions, by any means, fair or foul. But that's not true. Our only duty, my only purpose in appearing in this courtroom before you today, is to ensure that justice is obtained for the present defendant, Barbara Scott, or for any whose case falls into my hands. So I repeat, let the facts speak for themselves. And if the facts persuade you that she ought to be discharged and acquitted of the only crime that the people's indictment charges her with, namely the murder, willfully and with malice aforethought, of Chester Arthur Brandt, then you must discharge and acquit her. It'll be your sworn duty, and it's the justice that all honest citizens crave will require you to do so. Thank you.
Is the defense content, or does it desire time for rebuttal?
No, Your Honor. The defense is content.
Very well. Members of the jury, it now becomes my duty to charge you, that is, to guide you in the points of law you're called upon to consider when arriving at your decision. Fortunately, the points of law in this particular action are relatively few and relatively simple. The people produced here certain evidences and certain witnesses to persuade you that the circumstance, as specified in its indictment, permitted of no other reasonable interpretation but the guilt of the defendant, Barbara Scott. The defense produced certain other witnesses to persuade you that the circumstance did indeed permit of at least a reasonable doubt as to the defendant's guilt. You later heard the defendant repudiate that statement, and you heard the reasons she advanced for swearing falsely to it in the first instance. The question to be decided here is whether or not the defendant lied when she swore to her statement in the first instance, or whether or not she lied when she repudiated it in the second instance. No witness in the people's testified as to actually seeing the defendant discharge the bullet that caused the death of Chester Arthur Brandt. Evidence in any action of this kind, that is, willful and premeditated murder, is almost invariably circumstantial, because most premeditated murders will naturally take every precaution so that they're not observed in the act of commission. But under our laws, circumstantial evidence is entirely valid and admissible, provided it is consistent and points unmistakably in one direction. Finally, we come to what is tended to be the, if not the, most important links in the people's chain of circumstances, namely the evidence and testimony provided by the witness, Sheila Vincent. If her testimony, though circumstantial, is to be believed, there would be little room in your minds the defendant is guilty as charged. The defense produced in rebuttal certain other witnesses, namely the witness James Aloysius Perry, whose testimony tended to discredit completely the testimony of Sheila Vincent. So I think it is safe to say that your verdict should rest to a very large extent on this one point. Do you or do you not believe in the testimony of Sheila Vincent? Does or does that not leave any reasonable doubt in your minds as to its truth or its interest? Now, as to how you should interpret that term, reasonable doubt. Reasonable doubt is neither whim, an impulse, an intuition, nor is it a subterfuge to keep you from performing an unpleasant duty, nor a desire to be more lenient because a defendant's personality is sympathetic towards you. It must be a true doubt, an honest doubt, based on fact or lack of fact. But if you have such a doubt, it is your sworn duty to find your acquittal. I think I've talked enough, and I'm sufficiently cognizant of the points of law involved to be able to arrive intelligently at a just and true decision. Members of the jury, the case is yours.
Members of the jury, how do you reply Guilty or not guilty? 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 Your Honor, the jury finds the defendant not guilty.
I wish to commend the jury for its finding, which in my opinion is in accordance with the testimony provided to us. The indictment of the people versus Barbara Scott is vacated, and the defendant is to be released with all her prior rights intact. Adjourned.
Congratulations, dear.
Thank you.
Let's just say I repaid every bit of my debt to you.
Edith, if I could get a word in edgewise, I'd like to say that I agree with you. Completely.
Thank you, Alex. And thank you for being so completely free from guilt this entire trial. Mr. Woodward, it strikes me that you understood the transcript based on the testimony we heard.
However, as a matter of fact, I anticipated the verdict a little. The district attorney's office is now drawing up a warrant for the arrest of Sheila Benson.
I'll be a copy to you as soon as it's ready. I'd like to congratulate you, Miss Scott, for conducting very sound defense. Our bar has now reviewed such promising new talent.
Thank you, Your Honor. Coming from you, that is a praise.
And as for you, young lady, after feeling that line only gets you worse trouble than you were in before. Oh, I have. I have. Good. I'm inclined to believe you know. Goodbye.
Edith, now that your time is your own again, how about joining me for dinner tonight?
I'm sure I'll enjoy hashing out my first big case.
And other more personal matters?
I'm sure I'll enjoy that too.
That's how you report things.
Step forward, please. So, This is an emotional time for this cast because this being closing night and we're nearing the end of the school year. This is our last chance to perform in front of an audience. And for our seniors, this is the last dance. And I wanted to recognize them individually, and I promise I will be brief because it's Sunday. We all want to get home and sleep. But we're going to start off by talking very briefly about Sarah. Sarah, step forward a little bit there. Now, this is Sarah's first show with me, and I do have a quick story. Can I tell that story? Okay, good. We actually kind of, not really met, but we played video games together over the summer. We played a game called Among Us. And in the game, you know, there are traitors, people stab each other in the back. It's a video game. Well, she sent me a message on Teams and said, "Oh, and I promise not to stab you in the back." On Teams, which is sponsored by the school. So I got called into the office. Sarah got called into the office. Sarah's mom got involved, and yeah, Mr. Murray had to ask me, "Do you feel threatened right now, Mr. Murray?" No. So thank you, Sarah, for giving us your time and for not stabbing me in the back. Hello, step forward, please. This is a young man. This is our first time working together, and I feel really fortunate to have this time with him, but a little upset that I had to wait this long to work with you. Where the heck have you been? This young man is involved in so many other things. He's your class president, right? Also a member of the track and field team, takes part in 4 different jumping competitions: long jump, triple jump, and hurdles, right? He does so much, and he was still able to contribute his time and his efforts and his talent here. I just wish it would have started as a freshman. Thank you very much. Andy, step forward. I have a question for you, Andy. Are you a 4-year drama nerd? Or 3?
No, 3. They made me take PE, so.
They made her take PE.
I was fighting for it so hard.
It's difficult to be, and we call it a 4-year nerd. To be in drama for 4 years is incredibly challenging because there are so many classes you have to take to graduate. PE being one of those, but also history always is a stumbling block for my sophomores. They've got to take their history class, Spanish class. Got to have a certain number of years of Spanish. And to make those schedules work with all of the other required courses is a challenge. I'm glad we had you at least for 3. But unfortunately, like Aloe and like Sarah, this is your first play with me, correct? Well, I'm glad we were able to spend this time together. So thank you. This is Kira. In your programs, you'll notice that there's another courtroom, animation that she drew for us. She's incredibly talented and is such a great mentor to our younger actors in our period 6 class. I feel so fortunate because she's so much more than just a stenographer. Definitely very talented and a joy to work with. So thank you.
And also, this is my 4th year and my first and last play performance.
All right, Jimena, step forward. the biggest surprise to me because she came in with Amelia to auditions and was just going to watch. She's like, oh no, I don't want to be this. And she and Emma came in and they're like, no. And we couldn't get Emma. As hard as we tried, we could not get Emma. But Jimena's like, well, if they can do this, I can do it. And I didn't see this, but I hear that when she got cast, she was like through the moon. Just good night. It's like, oh my God, he loves me. He thinks I'm amazing. I can write this down. She's not denying you that. What I love about your performance, especially in this, is your gravitas. You come in and you own this part. And it was so easy to cast you, and I want to thank you for, succumbing to the draw of the stage. Thank you. Next up is Daisy. Daisy is such a wonderful actress because no matter what it is I ask her to do, she's like, okay. She does it. And we kind of brainstormed. She was sitting there one day, and I came over to Santa Express and said, well, what do you want to do with this character? Because you only have a few lines, and they're very similar. And they said, we got to find a way to stand out. And we played with some different accents, and eventually, she tried this old lady thing, and it worked out really well. And it just
She fell asleep.
I didn't want to make her look bad. But it worked out and it stuck. And you've been the same way all the time you've been in drama. Whatever it is we ask you to do, you're like, yeah, I'll do that. The quietest, the most humble, and still incredibly talented Daisy, we're going to miss you so much. Next up, Apollo. I got so excited. At the beginning of second semester, I found out that Apollo was going to be my TA. I'm like, yes! Apollo showed up, sat right there with my TA. I'm like, yeah, high five. All right, here we go. The next day, gone. Over to C school. And actually, turned out to be a really good move because Apollo graduated, 3 weeks ago.
Woo!
And
Graduate!
the fact that Apollo was still willing and able to audition for the play and take on a role. And when I pick a show to do, I generally have some ideas about who I'd like to cast. And Apollo was the one. This was the one person I knew what part you were going to get. Because this was the part that I played in this play in high school in 1988. And without a doubt, the one time, I think, in all my years of pre-casting a show in my head, it actually came to fruition. I've written parts for myself that I never even got. But I knew Apollo was going to get this one, and you killed it. And I'm so happy. Almost there. Joy, step forward. Now, you may not know this, but Joy is an amazing singer.
She is. I've seen her YouTube channel.
Go ahead and start that song we were talking about. No, it's funny because in high school I did musicals and things like that. My dad was an opera singer, and he would say, "Oh, Josh, as a singer, you're a good actor." Right? Joy, on the other hand, as a singer, you're an amazing actor and singer. You do both so incredibly well. And she came in as a TA for me at the beginning of this semester and has really taken on an amazing leadership role and works with these younger actors and sets the bar for them so incredibly well. I'm going to miss you, kid, and I thank you for being here. club president, assistant director, actress, top shelf drama nerd. That's what I wrote right here. Top shelf. We get passionate about things that we love. And I can't think of anyone who gets more passionate about what we do here in this room than McKenna. She is fierce when it comes to making sure that we're doing all of the things that we need to be doing and doing them the right way. She is an amazing talent, and I'm so lucky to have you here as my drama club president. And so last senior, Amelia, step forward. Kind of like Alo is involved in a gazillion other things. And I can't even imagine being that busy and still being as successful as we both have been. So Amelia is our vice president of Drama Club. She is the founder of the Cards for Kindness Club on campus, which has been such a huge boon. I've gotten a couple of cards from that organization, and it lifts the spirit, and it's such a nice group. She is the primary trumpeter for mariachi. Now, I've spoken with Mr. Godfrey, and he said that Amelia is instrumental in the success of that program. But she was also an academic at the beginning of the year. And then high schooler. And she's also in line to be the valedictorian this year. And was just accepted to Harvard. No, I don't have any, unfortunately, but I want to thank you because she was also a member of the cast of Death is Weird, and coming back and sticking with the program, even after the heartbreak of that, speaks a lot about you, and I want to thank you for your efforts here. Thousands of words to memorize, and they just help you get some of what they want. So thank you very much. We'll say a couple things, and then we can all go home. I want to thank my tech guys up there. And I want to give a special thanks to Jessica, my student. She doesn't like to be the center of attention, so we're going to talk about her a whole lot. But last one, and that's my assistant director, McKenna. Tough conversations with the students, and it really does mean a lot to me that I can say, hey, we need to make sure that everyone's here on time, and she's the one to yell at them sometimes. Thank you, seniors. You guys are amazing, and audience.